Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management webinar series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. My name is Wayne Bowen. I'm the program manager for the Recycling Market Center and will serve as your moderator today. Today's topic is truth in recycling labeling, and we have three presenters with us: Nick Lapis from Californians Against Waste, Heidi Sanborn from the National Stewardship Action Council, and Lori Mendez from the Save the Albatross Coalition. After the presentations, we will have a Q&A session at the end of our presentation. So if you have a question or comment, you can use the Q&A feature on the control panel on your screen. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube links on the National Recycling Coalition and Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center websites. And also please note that the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center, its affiliates, and funders and the National Recycling Coalition assume no liability resulting from the use of any information provided during the webinar. This webinar is only provided as an informational tool, and no discrimination is intended and no endorsement by these organizations is applied. So we're going to start off with Nick, who's the Director of Advocacy for Californians Against Waste, known as CAW or CAW. He's been with the organization since 2007. In that time, Nick has led the team of advocates and campaigns to pass groundbreaking laws that have positioned California as a global leader in reducing and recovering waste. By building strong coalitions, he has helped enact policies to reduce the impacts of climate change, recover organic waste, reduce plastic pollution, and develop sustainable markets for recyclable materials. Nick also engages in policy development and research, representing CAW on a variety of boards, commissions, task force, and coalitions. I'm going to hand it over to you, Nick.
Good morning, everybody. Share my screen. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Great. Turn off my video to make sure I'm not clogging the bandwidth. Yeah, thank you for having me here. So my name is Nick Lapis. I'm with Californians Against Waste. For folks who don't know us, we're an environmental organization based in Sacramento, California. We've been around since the late 70s. Really originally focused on bottle deposits and the California bottle bill, but since then we've moved on to a host of other environmental waste related issues. So everything from organics to plastics to e-waste and individual product policies. I'm going to talk about the greenwashing truth in recycling legislation that California passed this past year. And there were a few different bills passed. Okay, sorry. So there was a package of bills signed by the governor that had a couple of overarching themes. The theme that I want to talk about today is truth in recycling. There were also themes of eliminating toxics and some other things as well, but really one of the main overarching themes was this truth in recycling. And that really takes a few different forms. It takes the form of labeling, but also takes the form of what we tell customers and residents actually happens with their trash and their recyclables after it leaves their curb. So the bill that probably got the most attention was SB 343 by Senator Ben Allen. And we co-sponsored this with Heidi Sanborn, who's speaking after me, I believe. And it basically redefines when somebody can use the term recyclable and when they can use the chasing arrows. California was one of the leaders in the 90s, in the early 90s, with limiting who can use the term recyclable, but it was more or less just tied to whether or not people have access, curbside access to the recycling of that material. And it didn't really talk to what actually happens to the material. And so this bill basically expands the limitations to require that you can only use the word recyclable or the chasing arrows if the product will realistically get recycled if you put it in your blue bin, to oversimplify. And it's been a concept that's been a little hard for some folks, especially some of the manufacturers, to really understand because they view recyclability as the inherent property of a material. Can this product be recycled? And if it can, then it is recyclable. The problem with that is that that's not how the public views the term. The technical nature of recyclability is one of the criteria, but it's also direction to consumers about what bin to put something into. And beyond that, it's also a marketing claim that talks about how sustainable a product is versus other products on the shelves. And so it really needs to be updated to make sure that people are not being deceived and that manufacturers who do use recyclable packaging don't have a competitive disadvantage because they're competing with folks who haven't bothered to invest in recovering their materials, but can make the same claims. And as far as consumers are concerned, there's no discernible difference. So the bill is complicated and has a lot of different criteria. I kind of boiled it down here to 3 overarching criteria. The first is along the lines of the original law, that consumers have to have access to recycling it in the majority of the state at their homes. And the things that are added to that are, once it gets picked up, it has to actually get sorted by most MRFs, most recycling sorting facilities, into individual bales of material that can then go and be made into new products. So it's not enough that it's on the list of acceptable items. It has to, in practice, be separated at MRFs and in practice get sent to a facility that's going to manufacture new products. And that can't be in violation of the Basel Convention or a few of the other criteria. And then finally, there's a requirement that there are no toxins added, so no PFAS. There are a couple others listed, I believe. And you're not allowed to do anything that thwarts recycling. So the way this is going to work is that the state recycling agency is going to do a survey of jurisdictions and recycling facilities around the state. And they're going to determine who meets those first 2 criteria. So they're basically going to say, okay, number 1 PET bottles get recycled in the majority of the state, and they pass that criteria. But that's only the first cut. Beyond that, you can only use the term recyclable if you don't add any of the toxins in the bill, if you don't use a color that makes it unrecyclable. PET bottles are recyclable if they're clear, and there's some limited market for green, but almost no other color has any markets. And then you have to follow the APR design guidelines for recyclability as well, meaning you can't use an adhesive that's unrecyclable. You can't use PETG components mixed in with your PET, et cetera. So it's really this 2-layer system. First, the state takes a factual crack at what gets recovered, and then the second one is up to the manufacturers. There are similar requirements for compostable. In the case of compostable labeling, we've had, I believe, 6 or 7 bills. So it's been a little bit more of an iterative process over the years. California was the first to prohibit the use of the term biodegradable altogether because it is an inherently deceptive term. So again, back to my earlier comment about the nature of the material versus the message you're sending to consumers. Biodegradable is the message you're sending to consumers. You can throw it on the ground and it will break down. And people were definitely stretching the use of that term because everything will biodegrade given enough time. And then compostable also is direction to consumers. It means put it in the compost bin. And so there are a few different criteria here. Again, no inclusion of PFAS coatings, which was a big deal for things like the Chipotle bowls those molded fiber containers. A lot of them use PFAS coatings. It also requirements to have third-party certification. We previously had a requirement that you meet the ASTM standard, but it was hard to verify whether or not people were actually meeting that standard. We would get lab results back from labs overseas that weren't in English, and it was really hard to make heads or tails of whether or not the product was legitimately meeting that standard. And then another major change is that the product has to be eligible for use in organic agriculture. And the reason for that is currently the USDA does not allow compost that has any compostable plastics to be used in organic agriculture. And that means, in California at least, that means there's a much, much smaller market for the finished compost, and there is a much lower price, an order of magnitude less. And so that losing that organic certification was one of the biggest things that was compelling composters to not accept these products. And this sort of starts a countdown clock for the manufacturers to get their products either added to the USDA list of approved synthetics or get a statement from USDA that they are non-synthetic and don't need to be on the list. There's a similar bill on flushable wipes that Heidi's going to get into, so I'll just skip it for now. But again, the same concept of what we say on packaging is direction to consumers. And then a bill that people don't necessarily think of as related to this because it's not about labeling, but in our mind it's definitely related. And that's what do we call material that goes overseas? We've all seen the videos of mixed material going overseas and being hand sorted, ending up, being burned on site or dumped into the ocean. And basically what this bill does is it reclassifies the export of any mixed plastics in violation of the Basel Convention as disposal. So California local governments are required to meet a specific recycling rate, and they can no longer count the disposal, that was a Freudian slip, the shipping of mixed plastics overseas towards that goal. I'm going to play a quick video from the author, and then that's my final slide, so bear with me for a second.
Hi, I'm Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez. We all think when we put our plastic into that blue bin that we're actually recycling it. That's not necessarily the case. We use numbers to show we're recycling material that sometimes is shipped overseas, burnt, thrown at sea, improperly disposed of, but not recycled. It's time we come to truth with ourselves. AB 881 will force us to see the true issues that we're facing when it comes to recycling. It'll require us to only count those materials that are truly recycled, not just ones that we pack up and send overseas to become somebody else's problem. It's what we should have been doing all along. At least with AB 881, we'll have a baseline. We'll start to learn what we're actually recycling properly here in California.
All right, and a cute photo of my toddler, because I can't help but put him into presentations. I think we're going to do Q&A at the very end, so if you want to put any questions into the chat, we'll do them after the 3 presentations.
Yes, thank you, Nick. We're going to do that, the Q&A at the end. So,
and Heidi's on, so I can, I was having internet problems earlier, so I think I can share my screen now. Just let me go ahead and do that. And thanks, Dick. That was a great overview.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and share my screen. Earlier, my internet went out, so we were unsure if I was going to be able to do this from my computer.
Let me view your file here quick, Heidi. First of all, I'd like to thank you and Gary Liss for helping us with this, putting this webinar together. You know, your organization helped promote it and co-sponsor it. So thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Gary. So Heidi has been a leader in the solid waste industry for over 30 years, focused on source reduction and implementation of cost-effective projects that support a circular economy. Collaborating with local governments, government leaders, Heidi was one of two founding co-directors of the California Product Stewardship Council, a nonprofit formed in 2007 to change the way waste management is funded in California. In 2015, Heidi became the founding director of the National Stewardship Action Council, a 501c4 nonprofit that advocates for a circular economy using product stewardship and extended producer responsibility. She's engaged diverse stakeholder groups to promote product stewardship programs for pharmaceuticals, mercury thermostats, carpets, paint, fluorescent lights, batteries, and gas cylinders. Nationally, Heidi was instrumental in the adoption of EPR policies by the National League of Cities and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. In May of 2020, Heidi was appointed by the California Environmental Protection Agency to the statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling, and was elected chair by the 17 commissioners. So I'll turn it over to you, Heidi.
Thank you very much. And we're honored to be here and talking about this very important issue about truth in labeling. I want to highlight that Nick sits on the commission with me. So we've been doing a lot of work together this last couple of years that we think has been very fruitful and want to share. And I did want to just highlight that the work we were doing in California with 40 million people, we decided when I was running the California Product Stewardship Council, I really needed the capacity to lobby in other states and share the lessons we learned here nationally, and hopefully get bills from state of California to national without having every state have to try and pass it. So that's what we're going to talk about too in regards to truth in labeling. So I was highlighting this as 2021 and beyond because a lot happened last year, but a lot's going to happen this year. And it's about reducing contamination, toxics, pollution, and confusion. The public is confused and stressed, and we need to help with that by having clear labels. I also want to add, during Black History Month, we changed our tagline last year to be advocating for a circular and equitable economy. So I did want to start, and Nick and I talked about this, that it's important to just highlight that a lot of the success we think we had this last year in California is due to the commission's work and recommendations. So we started with 17 commissioners. We now have 16. And that's because CalRecycle hasn't nominated somebody else. We've got a listserv that you can follow so you can get updates. We're a unique commission in that we were created in law, and it is called it's a long name, the Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling. So we are to drive markets, keep things clean. How do we get better materials to market? And we've got a public portal and we take public comments. But this commission has been, I was elected chair, we've got Vice Chair Valle, and then a lot of, all the commissioners have committed enormous amounts of time to try and really giving good recommendations to the legislature and CalRecycle on what to do. And we only submit recommendations that have 16 to 0 votes. Or 17 when we had 17. So that tells the state and the legislators that we all agree, and that's very powerful. That's waste haulers, that's big counties, that's little counties, that's NGOs. And so they go with much more confidence into these, taking these recommendations on and making them law or policy. I encourage everybody to consider this model. It's been very effective in California. Happy to talk about that more if you'd like. You can grab my email and we'll talk about it. So I just wanted to highlight very quickly that we put out a lot of proposals, to date 34, and quite a few of them address truth in labeling. You know, again, the exports, which Nick just highlighted. What is recyclable? What can use the chasing arrow? Film plastic packaging and the bags. What is recyclable on those labels? And what's reasonable and enforced? What is compostable? It just, you know, we did quite a bit in this area. And the big one was requesting law enforcement enforcement of the existing law, labeling laws by the state attorney general. We have a lot of laws already in the books, and we've got a lot of labels out there that are misinforming people. So they buy the wrong thing, they put it in the wrong container. And we realized we really have to get existing laws enforced. So we sent a letter to the state on that. And Reuters even picked this up. So that was exciting. We're getting national and actually international coverage on this. So we have a hashtag tell the truth, truth matters. But the key recommendations again were what is recyclable on the label, what is compostable, and then the big letter that we sent December 3rd requesting enforcement action from our Attorney General in California on existing laws on bags and films. There's a link to the actual letter below, and we'll be posting this PowerPoint so everybody can grab it. You can also email me and I'll follow up. This is an example in that, and I want to thank Commissioner Jandel. She did 99% of the work on this policy. She actually went out and shopped and got examples and took pictures of the packaging that breaks we believe existing law. This is just one example of an Amazon Prime container listed as, remove the paper label before recycling, and a big chasing arrow for store drop off. Of course, we have very limited store drop off in California. I don't know how many stores you'd have to go to actually do that. But that's just one example. We have, gotten a lot of press. It was in Reuters, and I actually co-opted one of the quotes from Commissioner Jandel that it is the Wild West of recycling labeling in California, and there is no sheriff in town. And that is true really nationally. The green guides nationally are not law. They're not enforced. They're guides, and that's a big problem. And then also in the New York Times on the Truth in Labeling 343 bill, I was quoted saying nobody should be able to lie to the public. And I truly believe that. And they're lying on the labels, causing an entire cascade of events, including people buying the wrong thing, then putting it in the wrong container and leading to all this contamination. And I do want to highlight, the science is getting better and better and better about carcinogens, and when you recycle content, or if you've got, contaminants in different packages and you recycle them, you sometimes start consolidating them and concentrating them. And things are, maybe shouldn't be in food packaging. And that needs to be telling the truth too. And I've never understood how companies were able to line anything with PFAS that are known cancer-causing chemicals on our food containers, and nobody's labeling them. So this goes on and on, this truth in labeling. People can't make good purchasing decisions if they are not getting full information. I do want to highlight the bill that Nick touched on, which was AB 818. We were the co-sponsors of that bill on truth in labeling for what we previously called flushable wipes. They clearly were not flushable. They're made of a plastic and acetate, and they're clogging, people's pipes in homes and in large sanitation agencies across the country. During the pandemic, it really got bad because people couldn't get paper and they were flushing everything. Very expensive, and it's microplastics too. We don't want those in the water. But we had to go after this several years because COVID hit, and then that really delayed everything. The bill got caught in the crossfire of delays with COVID in the legislature. We reintroduced it. We were the co-sponsors with the Association of Sanitation Agencies and INDA, which is an industry group for these types of fibers. I can't even remember the name. It's awkward. But this bill actually does something. It says to the wipes manufacturers, you cannot label them as flushable. And you have to put a big red toilet with a line through it, and then say, do not flush, the words, and it has to be on the front and on the top. So when you buy it, you see it, and on the top, when it's dispersed, you know not to flush them. We built off the Washington bill and made it stronger. So we finally got it passed and signed by Governor Newsom last year, and we were, that's it, the Association of Non-Woven Fabrics Industry is INDA. And we also in the bill, you can follow this. Responsible Flushing Alliance is now doing PR. They have to do public education until 2026 regarding the what is flushable, what isn't, and making sure people are not using toilets as trash cans, and these wipes are not getting flushed. Now, the Wastewater Infrastructure Prevention and Environmental Safety Act, the WIPPES Act, actually was introduced based on AB 818. So again, as California goes, so goes the nation, and we're trying to skip having a lot of states to do the same bills by just going straight from California to the national. So we were very lucky to get Congressman Lowenthal originally from Long Beach, California. And he paired up with Republican Congresswoman McClain from Michigan. And they introduced the WIPPES Act last fall. We support it strongly. We urge you to support it. It's going to mean that they have the same labeling requirements. They have to do the PR campaign nationally and the same penalties as the California bill. Now, the industry has not yet fully supported this as we understand it at the federal level. So I've got a sign-on letter for you to look at and hopefully help us with. To follow up on that, it was just introduced last week, the WIPPES Act. And this takes another truth in labeling angle. Same authors, thankfully, but this will require the US EPA to establish standards for the flushability of disposable wipes and the dispersibility of them. Because labeled flushable is one thing, but making sure they can actually disperse into the pipes like regular toilet paper is another. And that's also cost. So they're saying now that it can't be labeled flushable unless it meets the dispersibility requirement. That's the second phase. It has to be, if it's labeled flushable or sewer and septic safe. Those are very, very important bills for sanitation agencies and for environmentalists that want to keep plastic out of water. So if you would like to help us with these two national bills, we have a sign-on letter you can sign on to, and I've got the link here. I can put it in the chat. But it actually is a letter to the manufacturers of these products asking them to support both of those national bills, change their labels as quickly as possible to meet the standards in the California bill, which is the national bill as well, and to never again put a product on the market in the United States labeled as flushable without meeting the dispersibility standard. We had that in the letter before the actual bill was introduced last week, but it's all the same thing. So again, truth in labeling for wipes, very important. And these are many of the companies that you think about for packaging, Procter & Gamble, Kimberly-Clark, and others. So there's lots to talk about. We hope that you can support all the work that we're all doing. This takes a lot of resources, and follow us on social media and spread the word. And I'll put that link in the chat so you can all hopefully sign on to the letter. We're going to be sending it next Friday afternoon, hopefully over to the companies that make those wipes. Hope that was helpful. Look forward to Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heidi. Our last presenter is Lori Mendez. Lori Mendez is legal counsel to the Save the Albatross Coalition, has been a civil litigator for over 31 years in San Diego. After completing a Master of Advanced Studies in Marine Biodiversity and Conservation program in 2018 at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and leading the transformation of that campus and UC San Diego to be single-use plastic-free, Ms. Mendez returned to the private sector and continues to work daily with grassroots organizations to reduce toxic single-use disposable plastic waste by implementing upstream reduction, extended producer responsibility, zero waste, and circular economy policies. Additionally, she and Northern California Recycling Association Counsel John Moore teamed up to design and educate on effective litigation principles and strategies to hold single-use plastic producers responsible in court. Lawsuits have been filed incorporating those legal principles and strategies. There you go.
Hi, can everybody see the screen?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Wayne. And thank you also, Nick and Heidi, for the good legislative work. Excellent. And hello, everybody. I'm so honored to be here with you folks today and to be a part of the National Recycling Coalition's Timely Truth in Recycling webinar. I am Lori Mendez. I am legal counsel, as you heard, for Save the Albatross Coalition. I'm zooming in to you all today from San Diego, California. And I don't know why we're on this one, but we shouldn't be. I'm sorry. How's that? Okay, that's better. Number one slide. By way of background, in 1997, Captain Charles Moore, maybe some of you have heard of, inadvertently discovered the North Pacific gyre while he was sailing home to Long Beach after a Trans-Pacific sailboat race. Due to currents, he ended up in the gyre, and by accident, he discovered that. And the gyre, in case you don't know, it brings together debris, including plastic debris, plastic trash from California and other places, and swirls around and around, and the plastic disintegrates into smaller and smaller pieces. Captain Moore says, and I take this to heart, that there is no way with plastics, especially in the gyre. So fast forward by 19 years, and Save the Albatross Coalition was founded by Captain Charles Moore and his friend Neil Seldman, president of the Institute for Local Reliance. And it was, Save the Albatross was founded as a campaign of Zero Waste USA. Since our founding in 2016, we've looked to the liaison albatross, recognizing that it is our canary in the coal mine. It's our inspiration and our North Star for defining our mission and doing our work to try to achieve zero waste. Some little known facts about the liaison albatross. With a wingspan of up to 8 feet, it soars above the Pacific Ocean, sometimes for weeks, months, and even years at a time. It touches down on land at the Midway Atoll to hook up with its mate and to rear its chicks. And like any, the Midway Atoll, in case you don't know, is made famous in World War II by the pivotal battle, but it's about 1,000 miles north of Kauai, and it's protected as part of the Papa Hanua Mokuakea National Monument. Well, as any parent tries to do, the liaison albatross forages for it forages for healthy food for its young. It eats things like fish, crustaceans, squid, almost anything that floats on the surface of the sea, and basically whatever it can find. Unfortunately, some of its foraging waters are within that gyre, and as you can imagine, it feeds on a lot of floating PET plastics, including Coca-Cola and other plastic bottle caps, and things like lighters and many other plastic bits. So it regurgitates that into its chicks' mouths. They eat it thinking it's nutritious food. And unfortunately, the chicks cannot then regurgitate themselves, and they die by the hundreds of thousands on the Midway Atoll with plastic, with bellies full of plastic. So we remember the liaison albatross to alert us to the largely out of sight, out of mind dangers of an unbridled single-use disposable plastic production, consumption, disposal, and leakage into the environment. And we have fixed our mission around doing right by the liaison albatross. True to that mission, we've introduced Connect the Cap legislation in California. We've written to Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and Nestle, and we asked them to voluntarily connect the cap. We're also exploring avenues for remedies with the court. Toward that end, I was tasked to check out what lawsuits have already been brought in California. In the next few minutes, I'll be providing a non-technical overview of what I found: 29 trailblazing civil lawsuits addressing plastic over the past decade. I say trailblazing because they were filed pre-passage of SB 343 and AB 1201 that Nick and Heidi talked about, that set recycling and composting standards.
I'm sorry, Lori, your slides are not showing full screen and they're not advancing, just to let you know.
They're not showing full screen. Okay, let's see.
I go to the top slideshow and then start from the beginning, and then you can sign. Just want to make sure we're getting the most from your.
Yeah, I see slideshow and it said resume, but
If you go to the top where it says slideshow, there you
yes, I see that.
go. And then you
Okay,
go,
and
oh, I don't know what that is. I would say not now. Or from the beginning. There.
I'll try from the beginning. Is that showing now? Nope.
I still see your side screen, but anyway, I just wanted you to know.
You see the side screen you're saying?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but do you see, that's weird, isn't it?
You have are you using two screens?
Yes, I can try. And
Swap your screens. That might help.
Really? Let's try. Can you only see one screen?
Now we see your desktop.
This is that nice. Okay. I don't want to take too much time with this, but I'm really not sure what to do.
We can see the slides. I mean, just advance your slides.
Okay, so can you now see Pinocchio?
Yep.
Okay, good. Well, that's what that's what I'm talking about, is unlawful, deceptive, unfair practices. So working within the confines of the current state of scientific and medical evidence, all 29 cases that I'll be discussing have been brought with the intent to protect California consumers from unlawful, deceptive, and unfair practices, in plain English, greenwashing. So as you know, this is what we're talking about. And Nick and Heidi pretty much covered this. So by holding defendants accountable for deceiving and misleading consumers by misrepresenting the chasing arrow symbols in the resin, identification codes equate to recyclability, and those who insist that PFAS coated green appearing products are compostable when the infrastructure is lacking, where there's a link in the supply chain that's missing, or where there is no end market. Well-meaning consumers pay a premium to be able to do the right thing when they're literally left holding the plastic bag with nothing more to avail themselves of except wish cycling, which isn't very good for the material management side either. Something must be done. So you will see that as a result of challenging the deceptive defendants in a public forum, namely a court of law, and shining a bright light on them while holding them civilly accountable for their misrepresentations, the goal is to bring each named defendant into compliance by having them pay fines along with the plaintiff's costs and fees, in addition to paying their own attorney fees. On October 6th, 2011, now Vice President, then California Attorney General Kamala Harris, filed the first of its kind greenwashing civil lawsuit on behalf of the people of California versus Bottled Water Retail, Enzo Plastics, and two others. Enzo, in this case, Enzo had previously represented that they added a special microbial additive to make their bottles 100% biodegradable and recyclable. The bottles were neither, and according to the complaint, Enzo thus violated state law and misled consumers. That case ended successfully in 2013 in a settlement, resulting in an $18,000 fine. But more importantly, the agreed upon court judgment prevented Enzo from continuing with its alleged unsubstantiated greenwashing. More recent cases have been filed against giant retailers. In December 2020, Lexington Law Group filed on behalf of Greenpeace against Walmart, but so far they've been having a procedurally rough go of it. The same law firm has had success in other greenwashing cases. The Last Beach Cleanup versus TerraCycle, also filed by Lexington attorneys in March 2021, very recently, settled 8 months later in November with an agreement by TerraCycle to come clean and independently certify that it's actually recycling the stuff it says it's recycling, plus paying an undisclosed amount to the Last Beach Cleanup for investigation and lawsuit costs and attorney fees. Likewise, in Smith versus Keurig Green Mountain, that was filed in September 2018 based upon alleged false statements of recyclability of Keurig K-Cup pods. After a rocky road of procedural maneuvering by Keurig, the parties have tentatively reached a settlement. While the terms are not yet known, it's reasonable to expect that Keurig will not be making further false claims about recyclability of its difficult to recycle K-Cups, and it will likely also pay attorney fees and costs. Meanwhile, a consortium of district attorneys representing up to 23 different counties have banded together and formed the Greenwashing Task Force, as they call themselves. Since 2014, working in concert, these district attorneys have brought 22 different claims to protect consumers from big retailers and some smaller businesses who allegedly marketed and sold plastics in California that are falsely and misleadingly labeled as biodegradable or compostable in violation of California law. The District Attorney Consortium has also had some success in settling against several of the retailers, including Walmart, who paid a total of almost $1 million, with $50,000 of the settlement monies going to Cal Recycle to fund testing of plastic products marketed to consumers as compostable or degradable. The settlement further prohibits Walmart from selling plastics labeled biodegradable or compostable unless scientific certification, that would be ASTM 6400, supports the claim. In the Overstock settlement, Overstock.com likewise agreed to stop greenwashing and to pay civil penalties of $27,000 going directly to the counties that brought the suit. The district attorneys attained a similar victory in 2018 when settling pre-litigation with Amazon. In addition to curtailing the greenwashing, Amazon paid $1.5 million in civil penalties and investigative costs to the 23 counties, and they agreed to pay an additional $50,000 to Cal Recycle. Coca-Cola, anyone? 2 cases recently were filed by the same Bay Area law firm, Gutride Safer, on the same day, June 16, 2021. The first is a class action case. It's called Schwartz versus Coca-Cola, Blue Triton Brands, and Niagara Bottling. And the second is Sierra Club versus Coca-Cola Company and Blue Triton Brands, Inc. Both suits were filed in federal district court because of the out-of-state defendants. And both companies allegedly greenwashed by misrepresenting that the bottles in their water came in were 100% recyclable. Plaintiffs in both cases faced staunch opposition by Coca-Cola, and motions to dismiss were heard last month. I believe the case was not dismissed yet because there are status conferences coming up this month and next month in both of those cases. Lastly, Earth Island Institute filed a lawsuit against Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and Nestle and other big polluters on February 26, 2020. That complaint alleges greenwashing. It further alleges that plastic packaging from these companies in the environment is a public nuisance, and it asks the defendants to clean up their mess or pay money to do so. That's something that Save the Albatross Coalition has been advocating for. Defendants unsuccessfully tried to remove the case from Superior Court to Federal District Court, but they remain in a more friendlier court in the state. Discovery is underway with procedural motions pending. So the often unseen truth is that overproduction, overconsumption, and leakage leads to a very high cost of environmental externalities. The truth is that with so much pollution, from the moment the oil and fractured natural gas comes out of the ground to the leakage of the majority of single-use disposable plastic, there are huge environmental and economic externalities. We know that change is incremental and that at any given point, the smallest change is the most likely change. Therefore, it is only through the systematic gradual accumulation of many small positive changes over a long period of time with numerous setbacks in between that culture is transformed. So little by little, these truths are increasingly being recognized on an international scale, as demonstrated by the Basel Convention, and now lawmakers at all levels are taking notice NPOs know, and now law firms and judges and ultimately consumers are learning about the true nature of the massive externalities and the true costs that we all are paying, especially those on the fence line and those in developing island nations who are often out of our sights but bear a massive disproportionate harm, suffering from high rates of asthma, cancer, and death. With the respective continuing efforts of all of us, I do believe that we will get to zero waste. Only then justice will be served. Thank you so much. If you would like more information on any of these cases, I will put the link into a link of the summary into the chat, and I'll also add my email. Thank you.
Laurie, let's leave that last slide up, the one with the albatross. That's a cool picture. And by the way, one of our attendees mentioned a book called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Coleridge. And they said they had to read that book back in the 60s in high school. I don't know if you're aware of that book. Okay, so we're gonna do the Q&A now. So if you have a question or a comment, you can use the Q&A feature on your dialog box. So if you've all the panelists, please unmute. And the first question is, I think this is for Nick. This goes back to his initial discussion of a bill. The question is, how does this bill take into account different recycling acceptability standards and materials across different counties and municipalities?
I answered a similar question in the chat.
Okay.
I mean, I'm curious what everybody else has to say. I think this is one of the trickiest parts of the issue. My personal take is that if it's not recyclable in most of the state, you shouldn't be able to call it recyclable and sell it statewide. Now, the tricky part to that in my mind is, well, what if something is truly recyclable or compostable in a small area and that's the only place where you sell it? And that's not a scenario we've really addressed in the bill. I mean, frankly, I've yet to actually see that be the case. But I'm curious what Heidi and Lori think.
I'll just add that some things that can't be addressed by legislation can be addressed with lawsuits. And again, that can either be a part of a settlement, but basically the idea of misrepresenting something as being recyclable or compostable is exactly what Nick is talking about. The implication is that it is recyclable where you live, where the consumer lives and consumes, and that's just not true. I mean, it's just really misrepresentation, it's deceptive. And that really is the crux of many of these lawsuits that were filed. And so again, if defendants get slapped enough times and hard enough, then the idea is, they're gonna have to take heed. It may start affecting their bottom line. And so, that's the idea, in addition to the legislation, is putting pressure on the producers to eventually not produce these products that are not recyclable or compostable.
And I'll add to build on Laurie's comments, and I think these are all very important tools in the toolbox to get the behavior we're looking for. But to me, in 343, we set the goal of 60% of curbside programs would publicly announce that they would accept a certain material type as recyclable. And we had debates about that number. And I said to everybody, has anybody graduated college with a 60? Because where I come from, that's appalling grade. To me, we should be in the 80s of just acceptability. And then hoping we get things bailed and clean at the back end. This to me is a floor, not a ceiling. And the companies have got to start realizing that they can't just say, I had one industry person say to me on a call, what is wrong with putting on a bag, return to retail? And I said, well, you show me the website that shows people where that retailer is that takes that. They have no site. And Jandell's done a lot of work on this. She's gone to all kinds of stores And they don't have the drop-offs where they say that they do have them, and they're super rare. So I said, I think it's mean to label things as return to retail when they could run all over town for a single bag to get recycled. That's just not okay. It's not kind. And we need to stop misinforming the public and acting like everything's recyclable when it's not.
Okay, this one's just basically asking for a comment. I've heard the following: some haulers / jurisdictions seem to accept all sorts of plastics and recycling in the recycling bin to increase participation, increase the diversion numbers. But at the MRF, they pull that out and it's just landfill discontamination.
Yep.
Yeah, I see that too.
That's
So
definitely the case. And that's why, sort of the first cut is accepted in the programs. The second cut is, do the MRFs actually do something with it?
That's why we have a two-phase cutoff, because that's exactly the problem. And what the commission discussed at length is that the public doesn't trust government anymore. They don't trust anybody anymore because they're finding out that what they thought was one of those reliable systems, the recycling system, instead we're landfilling, we're burning, we're shipping it overseas and calling it recycling. And it's polluting from all over the world. And, I call it environmental injustice, what we're doing there. That people are tired of misinformation and they need to be able to count on what they're being told is accurate. So this is where the commission has been very united. We cannot clean up our systems until we clean up, at least start with telling the consumer the truth so they can make a good purchase, an informed purchase, and then an informed disposal option.
Thank you. This is a sort of a long question, so please bear with me. An adhesive label typically has the following components: ink plus coatings, then the face stock, example, paper, then adhesive and release liner. To be called recyclable or compostable, does every component need to be recyclable or compostable if the label is called recyclable or compostable? For example, the printed label is certified compostable, but the liner is not. Alternative, in another example, the label is recyclable compostable, meaning the face stock can be recycled by screening out the non-compostable adhesives. Can this label be called recyclable?
There are a few different answers for recyclable and for compostable there. Let me take compostable first. For compostable, yes, the entire product has to be compostable. That's one of the reasons why we mandated the third-party certification, is that the third-party certifiers require the finished product to be tested, not just, you use PLA in it, and PLA is hypothetically biodegradable, and so therefore your product is biodegradable. The problem with that is you could make a really thick product out of PLA that won't break down, or, in the example that was listed, adhesives actually have a hard time composting, so for compostable, it's got to be the entire product. For recyclable, we took a slightly different approach because it was a little harder to get to. And basically, you can't add anything that inhibits recycling. So you can have a paper label that does not inhibit the recycling of the plastic water bottle. You can't have a label that would, not pass the sink or float test, or, in the melting process would end up contaminating the finished product. And the way we do that is we punt it to the APR design guidelines, designed for recyclability, and basically say you have to be in compliance with, I forget the term, but I want to say it's like tier 1 or something along those lines in the design guidelines.
How does the bill take into account different recycling acceptability standards and materials across different counties and municipalities?
You can go ahead, Nick. I mean, it's basically CalRecycle is going to come up with a tabulation of how many systems or how many people are covered by systems that accept them at the curb or in their systems, because some places don't have curbs.
Okay. Is there any outline on what will be the process for getting ASTM D6868 packaging structures through the OMRI process, OMRI? This has been talked about, but no clear idea on how to do it.
Yeah,
maybe you want to explain what those are, those standards.
So ASTM 6868 is the standard that we reference for compostable plastic coatings on paper versus 6400, which is wholly compostable plastics. And then OMRI is a certifier that your product is organic. And people oftentimes say accepted as OMRI is kind of shorthand for being allowed in organic agriculture. But OMRI actually certifies what is in compliance with the National Organic Program, which is a USDA program. And so the National Organic Program is the one that actually sets the standards, and they have two different pathways potentially. They have a process where they can add synthetics to the list. So synthetics are generally not allowable, but you can petition the National Organic Standards Board and have it added to the list. It's a cumbersome process, it's a long process, but that's why that part of the bill has extra phase-in time. The other option is a clarification that something is non-synthetic. So the reason paper is allowed in organic compost is that it's been determined to be non-synthetic. So it doesn't have to be added to the list of synthetics that are allowed. And I know there are a few folks in the compostable product world who think that their products could fit under that second definition, especially PHA, PHB manufacturers. But I think for most folks, it's the first one of going through the NOSB process, which is super wonky. And I'm sure everyone's eyes just totally glazed over, but it was a wonky question. So.
Thank you.
And I'd like to go back quickly to the question before. I got the exact language in front of me from 343. It says for plastic packaging, the plastic packaging is designed not to include any components, inks, adhesives, or labels that prevent the recyclability of the packaging according to the APR design guide published by the Association of Plastics Recyclers. That's the exact language in the bill.
Thank you, Heidi. Speaking of plastics, is there any talk about changing the plastic resin symbol, not including the chasing arrows? For example, I remember many years ago that there was some talk about making a square symbol with the resin number inside for the plastic resin symbol.
We did, oh, you can go ahead.
I think better word, we prohibit the chasing arrows for the resin ID code, but we do allow equilateral triangles.
So basically, the industry went around in the 90s and lobbied and passed, like, I don't know, 20, 30 states bills that require the chasing arrows. And now in the big discussion in the bill was, well, we can't have this in California. Does it match all these other states? And we're like, yeah, well, shouldn't have passed it in all those other states. That was creating disharmony. And we're not going to continue lying to our customers in California because of some law in another state. We'll help you unwind them in other states, but you need to, and we gave them a couple of years for implementation to do that, actually. That was part of the negotiated why it's 2025. So they have a couple of years to change the laws in the other states requiring the chasing arrow, when clearly they wouldn't be allowed to use it here.
You may have mentioned this, but how much did in the TerraCycle case, what was the settlement amount? Do you know, Lori?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
The settlement amount for the TerraCycle case?
On the TerraCycle case, I don't think we have an amount. I think that was one that we don't know the amount. Yeah, let me double check. Sorry, let me just double check that one.
In the Q&A, Jan Della said that the amount is confidential.
Yeah.
I was just going to suggest you should reach out to Jandel.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Where can we learn more about the California DA Greenwashing Task Force? I'm an ADA in Pennsylvania and would like to explore whether Pennsylvania DAs might be able to collaborate similarly.
Sorry, you're asking for contact information to the California district attorneys that are part of the Greenwashing consortium?
Correct.
Okay, I can get you that information. I am having a hard time. I know this sounds terrible, but I only see the Q&A and I don't see chat, but I'm glad to put that information in there.
And they don't have an official website or anything. It's sort of an informal coalition of 24 district attorneys. The Alameda County District Attorney has been the lead, Nancy O'Malley and her staff, Elise Sandbach.
I have phone numbers and contact information. If you want, I can add it. I just don't know where.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the contact information for any of the press releases, especially for the Alameda County ones, they all have contact information.
Yeah, and I did put my email address in the chat, so or in the Q&A, Lori@mendezplc.com. If you want, reach out to me and I'll definitely get that to you today.
Thank you. What is the status for PP, polypropylene? Is that right? I heard that California was not recognizing it as a truly recyclable, but the slides seem only to exclude 3, 4, 6, and 7. Please clarify.
That was a really big discussion of the commission. And so we heard that a lot of people, and Nick can add to this, but they were trying to ramp up polypropylene. But as of today, it would not meet the threshold for the definition of recyclability. So we said, basically, again, you've got 3 years to get that up, so that you've got a lot of investments to make. You've got to get the haulers separating it, and you've got to get it to market to meet that definition, or else it won't be able to use the chasing arrow. So, you know, there's ramp up time, and then if they can't maintain a certain recyclability rate, you know, they could fall off as well. Materials are going to come and go from the market. So this is not going to, you know, everything's going to be a shot in time. It's not going to be, you know, a fixed thing, because recyclabilities change as far as what's accepted and what's recyclable and what's on the market. Nick, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I mean, polypropylene is, in my opinion, the one that was the most on the bubble when we were having this conversation at the commission. And part of that was just a regional difference in that it seems to be recovered. If the state was Southern California, it would probably be sufficient to get on the list. I think a lot of the Southern California MRFs do separate polypropylene. Not all polypropylene. I mean, we're talking white tubs for the most part, so yogurt and sour cream, that kind of thing. But it was a lot less common in Northern California, and so they can get there. They can get there, but they're going to have to do some serious investment, and I don't think it'll ever be all polypropylene. One of the arguments in the Keurig lawsuit was that Keurig claimed that they should be able to call their K-cups recyclable because they're in polypropylene, and polypropylene is recyclable. And they're kind of two different issues with there. Even if polypropylene were recyclable, which it might be at some point in the future, not with coffee grounds in it, not in that shape, and not in that color. And so it goes beyond just the material type there.
Yeah, and I know in Pennsylvania, for example, there's certain areas that there are markets for polypropylene, but the infrastructure to, you know, optimally sort plastics out of a MRF line, you know, to capture that material is difficult. So I know, like, the Recycling Partnership has had some grant programs for MRFs to apply for grant funding to get the equipment to get the polypropylene out and recycle it, instead of, you know, before it was just going across the line and ending up in the landfill as contamination. But now there's certain areas that can do that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Next question is, it's widely known that nearly all compostable containers, example clamshells, have toxic non-compostable adhesive labels and toxic non-compostable seals. Obviously, this causes contamination and impossible for composters to compost these materials. What's being done to ensuring that compostable labels are being put into the containers?
I do not believe a non-compostable label on a compostable product would pass the BPI certification. We require the third-party certification.
Okay. This is a specific question here. We make 3 claims on our labels: plastic-free, recyclable, and compostable. We have a third-party certifications. Do we need to list them on the label anyway, or always?
No, you're not required to list the certifications. You're required to have one in the case of the compostability. Plastics free has not gone to court, but I think it's inevitable that it's going to go to court. And I honestly don't know where that's going to end up, because definitions of plastic vary heavily across the world. And, some folks include bioplastics as plastic, some don't. Same thing with elastomers and, things like
I have to
silicone
go.
and
I just want to
rubber.
say goodbye and thank you to everybody. I put my email in the chat. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Anyway, so I would be cautious with the plastics free, because I think that's just a ticking time bomb. But, again, I don't know what the product is. Maybe it is plastics free.
I think the idea is we need objective third-party verification, right, Nick? I mean, we need something that is uniform, and we need something that is transparent, and we need something that we can all count on as being validated.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of brand name non-bottle forms of packaging that the California bill targets? Example: Nature Valley granola bars are labeled as store drop-off recyclable. And if you visit their website, they make that claim.
Yeah, I mean, that flexible film packaging that has those claims would probably be in violation. I believe most Tetra Pak cartons would be in violation. K-cups, as I mentioned, plastic bags. We see it on an amazing number of products now. I could probably go on forever listing things, but those are kind of the egregious ones.
Now here's a comment: the big box stores in Fort Wayne, Indiana, have all the bins at the entrance for recycling plastic film bags. Why not in all places in the United States? Yeah, why not?
I'm not going to speak to why they don't. I mean, part of that, I think since Jan is on the line, I feel her channeling Jan a little bit. She would say that the post-consumer plastic bags don't have very high value. And generally speaking, the recyclers want the back of the house pallet wrap. They will take the front of the house stuff, but it can get pretty bad sometimes. So that's a major factor. In California, we had a law mandating that stores have those take back, and the law sunset, and most have gotten rid of their bins, with the exception of, I believe, some Walmarts and some Targets. But generally speaking, most stores have gotten rid of them.
Yeah, that was actually a comment.
When Jandel did respond to that and said, regarding store take-back bins, there are no buyers for the mixed mess in the few take-back bins that exist. It is trash. Plastic recyclers only want clean, back-of-store pallet wrap.
Yeah, I'd say any unattended drop-off, you're going to have that problem with potentially with contamination. So that is a big problem. Let's see here. This has to do with flushable wipes. How can we know whether a flushable wipe is truly decomposable? Costco sells Kirkland flushable wipes with EcoFlush technology. Does that mean anything? I have a septic system and I've used it for 7 years, including a problem-free cleanout without issue.
I'm not an expert in this, and this is really something Heidi has led on. But from what I've heard her say over the years, I don't believe any flushable wipes are flushable. Lori, I don't know if you or Gary, if either of you.
You mean decomposable? Decomposable.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Or should be flushed, I guess. Again, I'm trying. This is kind of something I'm consciously doing, is trying to change the marketing terms from characteristics of the product to direction to consumers. So they're not flushable because we shouldn't be telling consumers to flush them. They're not recyclable because we shouldn't be telling consumers to recycle them. So it's an intentional shift on my part. I'm hoping we'll catch on.
Okay. Has California considered labeling laws like the new law requiring repairability information on electronics, like one in France?
We have. We have considered that. We're actually, well, I guess I probably shouldn't be saying anything, but stay tuned. There should be an announcement around right to repair in the next couple weeks.
How will Senate Bills 343 and AB 818 impact the filing of future labeling lawsuits? How would potential for revised green guides impact the filing of lawsuits on recyclability labeling?
I will think that it gives us one more, quiver. It just gives us some more ammunition to file a lawsuit on that grounds as well. So it's just one more law to cite in the lawsuit that's being violated. But the hope is that producers will change their behavior and their products before it's necessary to file lawsuits. But if they're not following the law, then we can enforce it. And there are attorney fees for violations of the law, again, for being for deceptive and misleading practices. So I think, that's there's the carrot and the stick approach, and also incentive for attorneys to file more lawsuits. So it just gives us more ammunition is how I see it.
Can I ask a question of Lori?
Sure.
Wayne, is that right?
Yeah.
It seemed like a really big deal that the Keurig lawsuit was given class action status. Is that as big of a deal as it seems? And what does that mean for all of this?
Well, it's a big deal because, so from the beginning, the defendants in a lawsuit will try to drag out the lawsuits. So in state court, a lawsuit needs to be heard within 5 years, but the defendants will drag that out. But before, that lawsuit's heard, they will bring a lot of procedural motions right from the beginning. They'll say they don't belong there on all different grounds. If there are different defendants in the lawsuit, for example, the ones in addition to Coca-Cola, they'll all object and they'll all raise grounds. And anyway, it will be kicked down the road by several years. That's one reason that John Moore did not want to file a lawsuit in this, as a class action or as a regular lawsuit. We are actually looking at filing a multitude of small claims lawsuits to act as like flea bites to the producers' ankles and be so annoying that eventually, after having to defend themselves in small claims with tens of thousands of flea biting lawsuits, they would get out of California or, start doing the right thing. Or pay really to clean up their mess is what we were looking for. But anyway, as far as class action certification, that's one reason I believe the defendants settled. And again, if these lawsuits do go forward, the downside for the defendants is more attorney fees and costs to the plaintiff's counsel, the party that brings a suit. So, I do think that's a big deal. And I think, well, in Schwartz also versus Coca-Cola, that was certified as a class action as well, I believe. So yeah, these cases are getting certified and the courts are understanding the legitimacy of the complaints of the plaintiffs, and they are taking note. And again, as more judges get educated, about these kinds of lawsuits that are being brought forward, then they'll understand the legitimacy of the problem itself and the cases.
Thank you. This one you may have touched on a little bit, but I apologize if it's a repeat. On the recyclability of packaging, how much of a package/unit needs to be recyclable? For instance, paper with plastic lining, even if it meets the acceptability standards, not 100% of the package is recyclable. The paper label is another example. At the other extreme, some companies want steel and paper composite packages to be considered recyclable. They don't harm the system, but only about 60% of the package is recycled. Where do you draw the line?
That was a big point of discussion in the bill, because the latter example is a clear example of material that's not recyclable and should not be able to be called that. On the flip side, you have things like, like a cereal box, right? Where the cardboard is recyclable, the plastic inside isn't. And the manufacturers made the argument that, we don't want to discourage recycling of the cardboard. And so the bill allows, and I don't remember the exact wording, I apologize, but it does allow qualified claims when a specific portion of the package is recyclable. It's been a while since I've looked at that language, so I don't remember it off the top of my head, but you should look it up. There is some nuance there.
When I was studying at Scripps a couple of years back and working toward my capstone, I did some research, and what I learned is that the same kind of plastic coating, and you all are experts on this way more than I am, but same kind of plastic coating is on Starbucks cups, because I was looking specifically at coffee cups and how to get those off the campus. But at any rate, my understanding is there are only very few specialized recycling facilities that are able to separate that plastic resin from the rest of the cardboard product. So my understanding is for that reason that they're not generally recyclable, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
It's a little murky. We've had the paper industry testify to the commission. I've had a lot of offline conversations with them over the years, and have gotten sort of mixed responses on that, ranging from it has to go to grade 52 mil, which there aren't that many of, to no, all the polyethylene will float and it'll just come out in the process. I think that I would hope that somebody could look into that with a little bit more detail, because it's been a little hard to differentiate the claims. Or maybe I'm just misunderstanding it and it's all totally consistent, which is also possible.
Okay. Here's a nice comment. As someone whose company has performed detailed sorting of waste materials at dozens of California landfills and various CalRecycle statewide waste characterization studies over the years, and it has also sorted inbound recyclables at MRFs and organic processing facilities in numerous states, I appreciate the thoughtful presentation on this issue and the clear-eyed focus on truly defining what is or what is not recyclable or compostable and why. As with many issues, the more stakeholders partake in the discussion, the better chance we have to get at the most balanced data/science-driven answer. So, and I think too, just this is one of our highest attended webinars, so there is a great interest in this topic. So it's great that we're all talking about it. And the National Recycling Coalition is we have to thank them too for bringing this to the fore.
If I could just add that science is one thing that we really need more of in the law. We need the law's help, as Nick was, as was asked, how will the different laws that are being passed affect litigation, but science is really something we need to link the causation gap. So you have to show that there's a harm, and you have to show that it was caused by, say, for example, microplastics or what have you, or single-use disposable plastics. And we have to be able to link those. So whether it's GPS location of where these plastics are, or what harms they do to human bodies when they're consumed, whatever it is, science is something that we are in desperate need. Good science that we're in desperate need of more of.
Are international third-party certifications acceptable in the United States?
Nick?
It took me a second to unmute. So the original version of 1201 specifically called out the Biodegradable Products Institute and said that you have to be BPI certified. That was eventually taken out for a variety of reasons, but basically the state is authorized to accept certifiers. And so they could accept a third-party certifier that's international, but they're gonna have to come up with standards for that.
Yeah, the certifiers need to be certified.
Yeah.
Okay. And Jandel suggests reading the FTC legal requirements can be found. It's on a comprehensive Greenpeace report called the Circular Claims Fall Flat. There's a website there. If you go to greenpeace.org, they have this report related to the Federal Trade Commission requirements. Let's see here. All kind of website recommendations here. What about cartons?
You know, for a while, the Carton Council, I think, was on the track to becoming a recyclable. They were funding, you know, sorting equipment. They were buying back material. There are not that many mills that take cartons, from what I understand, and that in of itself is a limit to the recyclability. Then beyond that, you also have the fact that they rot. And so MRF operators have complained that while they're waiting for a container load to build up at their MRF, it starts rotting and attracting rats and smelling bad. So there are just operational issues as well with accumulating enough cartons before they go bad to get them to one of the few mills. So right now, I can't imagine any cartons passing the requirements. But you know, they were headed in that direction, so it's not impossible that they would at some point meet the requirements.
Yeah, we had a webinar last year on the Carton Council, and they, you know, it was actually an update from webinar 3 years previous, and they made great strides in you know, getting the infrastructure up to speed with, you know, to handle the cartons that are recycled, you know, with grants and getting, you know, equipment grants and things like that. So they have made a lot of progress, but there's still, I imagine, a lot more progress to be made.
You know, one thing that's interesting about cartons is we did a study on this. Can't remember if we called it a white paper or what, but we basically had some interns call every MRF in the state to try to figure out what was happening to the cartons. And so even for a lot of the MRFs that were supposedly recycling the cartons, it was going into the mixed waste paper where we believe it was mostly contaminant in that stream. So even though it was going overseas in a recycling container, I don't think it was being recycled. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics there when you have something that can act like paper in a MRF.
I don't know too if that was one of the things that TerraCycle. I thought I saw TerraCycle labels on cartons. Is that right, Nick, or not?
That might be true. I don't know.
I don't know, but anyway, I was going to say that was with TerraCycle handling some of the harder to recycle items and not, you know, actually putting a limit on how many they were able to. They had numerical limits on the amount they would actually collect and recycle. And so consumers thought that all of the products that they were sending to TerraCycle were being recycled, and actually they weren't. So they had to change their practices after the lawsuit.
So with the new labeling, will ASTM certification standards change for PLAs? For example, they no longer pass the D6400 or D6868.
PLAs can still pass 6400 and 6868. It's an issue of thickness, mostly, as far as I know. So PLA coating on fiberboard usually doesn't have any issues. But as far as if the ASTM standards are going to change, they change constantly. And actually, the way the ASTM system is designed, standards have to be readopted every, I want to say 5 years in order to exist. And for anybody who's interested, it's actually really easy to join ACM. It's $75 a year, and every organization gets an equal vote. So for $75, CAW has the same vote as Dow Chemical. And so I definitely encourage folks to look into participating there.
It looks like we're running out of our allotted time here, so we're gonna wrap it up. So thank you everybody for all the questions. I know we missed a couple of them, so maybe we can follow up with the presenters with those questions. But again, this webinar, like all the webinars in this series, has been recorded. Will be made available via YouTube links on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Market Center websites. It takes probably a week or two to get the recording edited and up on our YouTube channel and website. So just please be patient with that. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope you'll join us for next month's webinar. Please visit the NRC and RMC websites for schedule updates. Thank you, Nick and Lori, and I know Heidi logged off, but we thank her also. So thanks for participating, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.